what Al Haymon is doing in the welterweight division is an absolute disgrace. I mean, he's doing boxing fans a massive disservice by actively trying to freeze Terence Crawford out of the welterweight picture. It is an absolute disgrace. Now, I've been somebody who has praised Al Haymon a lot over the years. I liked what he did when he first came on the scene with PBC, putting on a lot of free boxing, trying to revive the sport in the American market. And I still like some things that Al Haymon does now. But everyone has their good side and bad side, Al Haymon included. And what he's doing in the welterweight division is just one of the most terrible things I've seen in boxing for quite some time. Because we're not just talking about a world champion in Terence Crawford. No, we're talking about one of the best fighters in the entire sport, pound for pound. A guy who is someone who's fought on pay-per-view several times. A guy who's a multi-weight world champion. Very accomplished individual. And Haymon, PBC, Fox, and Showtime are apparently acting as though this guy doesn't even exist. Now, certain journalists came out on social media over the past week or so, claiming that the reason that this apparent boycott of certain fighters is happening is because Haymon is basically no longer recognizing the WBO as a legitimate sanctioning body, apparently because he believes the WBO's relationship with Frank Warren and Top Rank is far too cozy and that they show bias in favor of those promoters. Now, some people could accuse Haymon of having a similarly cozy relationship with other sanctioning bodies. But whatever the case is, and look, I'm not trying to deny the fact that the WBO have had a very, let's just say, good relationship with Frank Warren all the way back to the very beginning, the very inception of that organization. They've been close with Warren for a long time. With Bob Arum, I don't think they're quite as close with Arum as they've been with Warren over the years, but I'm willing to accept they are still close. But the answer to something like that happening is not to boycott the WBO. That's not the answer. And in fact, who started the beef between the WBO and Haymon, this apparent beef? Who started it? Was it Haymon who started it? Was he putting his fighters up for WBO sanctioned bouts? Was he paying the sanctioning fees? Did he boycott them first or did they boycott him first? I don't know. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? But certainly if you look at the WBO rankings, and any of you can go to this website, excellent website, by the way, box.live, that keep you up to date on all the sanctioning bodies' rankings. It's kind of a one-stop shop for up-to-date rankings. If you go here, you'll see that there is very few Al Haymon fighters in the WBO top 15 of most of the divisions. There are some, of course. Andy Ruiz is an Al Haymon fighter. I think you can find, who else in there? Danny Garcia is an Al Haymon fighter. There's some, but very, very few. If you go to the WBC rankings, you're going to find a much more mixed bag. You're going to find Haymon fighters in there. You're going to find some Aaron fighters in there. You're going to find some Eddie Hearn fighters in there, etc. But when it comes to the WBO, there's lots of different promoters represented in their rankings, but there is a distinct lack of Al Haymon fighters. There's no question. But as I say, who started the beef? I don't know. But in my opinion, the freeze out of Terence Crawford has little to do with the fact that he's a WBO champion. That's my view. I saw Al Haymon fighters like Errol Spence and several others basically, telling you in a roundabout way that they're not going to fight Terence Crawford unless he signs with Haymon before Terence Crawford won his WBO belt at welterweight. If you go back and watch some of the interviews, you'll see what I'm saying. They were already acting as though they're not trying to fight this guy even before he became a WBO champion in that division. Yeah, so I just think that it's a case of Al Haymon seeing Terence Crawford as the biggest threat to his stable. And because that biggest threat is not in his stable, well, he don't want to let that guy fight any of his guys. And it's not to say that Errol Spence couldn't beat Terence Crawford. I mean, I don't know who wins the fight. I think it's a fascinating fight. I'd love to see it. But I think Al Haymon also isn't certain that his guys would beat Crawford. Yeah. He sees it as a big risk putting any of his guys in there against Crawford. And if his top guy, let's say Spence, was to lose to Crawford, that puts Bob Arum back in the driving position in the welterweight division, doesn't it? Because then Arum can say, well, you know what? Haymon's guys are irrelevant. My guy beat their top guy. It's all happening over here at Top Rank. You don't need to pay attention to what Haymon's doing at welterweight. They're all the second tier guys. I've got the premier guy. So, yeah, that is what I suspect is actually going on here. But it's a disgrace. And Terence Crawford has talked about these absurd phrases that a lot of the Al Haymon welterweights come out with. And the main phrase, which, you know, many of you would have heard and find extremely annoying, I definitely find it annoying, is when you hear the Haymon fighters saying that somebody's on the wrong side of the street and they need to cross the street. I mean, what a load of nonsense. It's really disappointing to hear people like Errol Spence. You know, Spence is a fighter who, from the very start of his career, I had a massive amount of respect for. This is somebody who I really admired his talent. I really admired his attitude on the way up. And I thought, this guy's destined for good things. And I picked him to beat Kell Brook. And, you know, I just really rated him highly. But since becoming a world champion, his attitude has become very diva-ish. And again, this is very typical of a lot of Al Haymon fighters. The diva-ish attitude, starting talking about crossing the street and openly ducking is what we're having from a lot of Al Haymon guys. I mean, you had Deontay Wilder turning down a $120 million offer to fight, you know, Brazil on DAZN and then 2 fights against Anthony Joshua, turning it down. And somehow people can look at that and act like it's not a duck. Of course, that's a duck. But where we see this kind of behavior at its most extreme is in the welterweight division. So let me quote Terence Crawford. He said, in regards to several Haymon welterweights saying that Crawford's on the wrong side of the street, Crawford responded by saying, "There's no such thing." He said, "There's no such thing as across the street. Back in the day, you never heard fighters say across the street. What street? This is boxing. Everybody fight everybody. What street? Maurice is with DAZN and Rock Nation. Ramirez is with Top Rank and ESPN. What street is we talking about?" He goes on to say they got the right to do whatever they want, but there's no street, no line, there's no nothing. You know, it's boxing. The best is supposed to fight the best. That's it. I couldn't agree more with Terence Crawford. The best is supposed to fight the best. I mean, we just saw Eddie Hearn put Maurice Hooker in against a Top Rank guy. Something which Haymon, certainly in the welterweight division, is very reluctant to do. He don't want to put any of his guys in against the top Top Rank guy. He don't want to do that. Eddie Hearn was willing to do it, 140. Put his, 140-pound champion in against, one of Bob Arum's top guys at the weight. No problem. Al Haymon won't do it. For the most part, Haymon's scared to death of doing it for some reason. Yeah, all these other promoters, well, certainly Eddie Hearn, he's a lot more willing to gamble and put his guys in, against his main rivals' top guys. Because, of course, there have been plenty of Al Haymon fighters who have fought Eddie Hearn fighters. But when it comes to Haymon's top guys, he doesn't tend to like putting them in against Hearn's very best, like Anthony Joshua. Gave Joshua the runaround with regards to the Deontay Wilder fight for a year or so? In the end, Wilder was offered $120 million, which would have been $80 million against Anthony Joshua, and then, I think $100 million against Anthony Joshua, something like that. He was offered between $100 and $120 million, according to reports, to have the Brazil fight and then 2 fights against AJ. Massive money. And here we've got Wilder, after he saw the payday go down the drain, you got Wilder acting like he won something. You just lost the biggest payday of your whole life, and you're acting like you're happy. This is the kind of almost mind control that goes on in the cult of Al Haymon. It's bizarre stuff that you've got guys losing out on the biggest paydays in their career with no payday even close to that anywhere on the horizon, and they're happy. They're elated. He also says a lot about, how foolish Deontay Wilder is. He's a very good fighter. He might turn out to be the best heavyweight of this era. Who knows? But he's not the sharpest tool in the box, is he? Really isn't. But as I say, heavyweight, Haymon isn't quite so precious and quite so frightened as he is at welterweight. At heavyweight, obviously Ruiz fought AJ, but Ruiz was never one of Haymon's top guys. He was a new recruit, and Ruiz had nothing to lose. But a lot of the other guys, Haymon guys, were kept away from AJ. They kept Kaunaki away from AJ. They kept Luis Ortiz away from AJ. They kept Wilder away from AJ. They only let Ruiz go in there with him. But everybody else, over the past year, has been kept away. Just bizarre stuff. They were hoping to try to freeze AJ out. That's what they were hoping to do at heavyweight. Same way they've successfully frozen Terence Crawford out at welterweight. But at welterweight, Haymon is a lot more hardcore in terms of the freezing out process. And it is disgraceful what they're doing. They are denying boxing fans one of the best fights in the sport, which would be Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. I would love to see that fight. But as an outsider looking in, it certainly appears to be that Al Haymon is the one blocking that from happening. And now we've got apparently Fox and Showtime jumping on this WBO boycott, which makes it even more difficult to make that fight. Because, of course, Terence Crawford would want to be represented as a champion at the negotiating table. But if Haymon and, Fox and Showtime are saying, well, Crawford's not a champion because we don't recognize the WBO, then they're not going to offer him a fair deal, are they? So it is what it is. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comment section below. And again, I don't know who started the beef between Haymon and the WBO. Are the WBO an organization that's been very close to Frank Warren over the decades? Yes, they are. Are they also very close to Bob Arum? Yeah. But that's not the way, but boycotting them, that's not the way to solve the problem. And that's certainly not the way to give the fans the best fights. Yeah, I mean, you look at the middleweight division, Al Haymon has got a guy in Jamal Charlo, who's just been upgraded, I guess, to WBC regular champion or whatever the hell you call it now. Who's Charlo going to fight in the middleweight division? I mean, Haymon just doesn't want to put Charlo in against any of the DAZN fighters. Well, what's up with that? I mean, he's doing his own fighter a disservice, actually, by not putting him in against the DAZN. He's certainly not going to put him in against Andrade, is he? Because he doesn't recognize the WBO. I mean, he says he wants to put him in against, Charlo's been talking about fighting Golovkin and fighting Canelo and what have you. I'm sure there are steps that Al Haymon could take to make that happen. One of the steps that he'd probably have to take is having Charlo fight on DAZN. At least for one fight. He'd probably have to do that because, Charlo is nowhere near the level of Canelo or Golovkin commercially. I mean, he's not even close to being on their level commercially, in terms of money making, in terms of fame and notoriety and prestige. It's not even close. So the chances of any of those guys going over to Fox or Showtime to fight Charlo, that's just impossible. That's just never going to happen. But why shouldn't Charlo be willing to fight on DAZN against Canelo or Golovkin or Andrade, even Danny Jacobs? Why shouldn't he be willing to do that? Those are all good fights. But somehow Haymon brainwashes these people into thinking that it's reasonable to go above and beyond to avoid fighting competition when they are signed with a rival network or a rival promoter. He brainwashes them into thinking that's reasonable. Man, the cult of Al Haymon at this point really has become a cult. I think when Haymon first came on the scene, it was far less cultish. And it was far more something that I was supporting. But at this point, man, it's really going downhill. PBC is going downhill, man, in terms of, it's become more about Al Haymon and his business rather than putting on the best fights and reviving boxing, which is apparently what it set out to do at its inception, PBC. But now it's more about Al Haymon doing what's best for his business, not even doing what's best for his own fighters a lot of the time. Because if it was Haymon doing what's best for his own fighters. And look, he does good by some of his fighters. I mean, Andy Ruiz, he was elated when he got the Anthony Joshua fight. Just imagine how upset Luis Ortiz must be behind the scenes that he was apparently advised not to take the Anthony Joshua fight. I mean, he must be fuming in light of what Ruiz did. So Ortiz must be fuming. Ruiz went ahead and got the opportunity. So obviously, he ain't got no complaints when it comes to Al Haymon. But he was sent over there to fight AJ as a stab in the dark. He had nothing to lose. He wasn't at the time seen as some pay-per-view guy or anything like that. He just fought Dimitrenko. Whereas Charlo has been groomed to be a star by PBC for a long time. He's not a star yet, but they've tried to groom him to be a star. If you care that much about what's best for Charlo, let him fight on DAZN for a one-off fight against one of the champions. Let him go do that. Let him fight Andrade. Instead of having a silly WBO boycott. If your guy beats the WBO champion, just like when Ruiz beat AJ, he becomes WBO champion. Build up your stars. If you build up a star big enough, the sanctioning bodies are going to come and they're going to be happy for your fighters to hold their belts. That's how it works. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. What's happening about? Join me on Patreon. I upload a minimum of 2 podcasts every single week, covering a wide variety of controversial topics, as well as live stream Q&A sessions. Take a look on screen right now at some of the podcasts I've produced so far. For just $3 a month, the equivalent of about £2 a month, you get access to all my new podcasts and my entire back catalogue of past podcasts, including my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You can listen on your computer or on your smartphone or tablet by downloading the Patreon app from the Google Play Store or the App Store for free. The Patreon app also allows you to download each podcast in MP3. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you get access to dozens of hours of exclusive content. It's easy to sign up, there's no contract, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.